Recent figures released on dog theft for 2020 reveal that approximately 2,400 dogs were stolen in total throughout the entire year. That's about 7 every single day, and a high percentage of those dogs were stolen from the owner's gardens. If you want to prevent the theft of your dog from your garden, then watch this video, because over the next 10 minutes I will be giving you 10 tips, that's 1 tip every single minute, on how to prevent the theft of your dog from your garden. I'm Colin Butcher, the Pet Detective, and you're watching Pet Detective TV. I've been recovering stolen dogs for over 20 years, and I can say with a great degree of confidence that the 3 areas where your dog is most vulnerable is A, when it's out on a walk, especially off lead; secondly, when you leave your dog unsupervised in your car; and thirdly, when you're leaving your dog in your garden. And over the last few years, thieves are increasingly turning their attention to stealing dogs from owners' gardens. So I'm going to make some recommendations, and if you only implement half of my recommendations, then I guarantee that you'll significantly reduce the likelihood that your dog will be stolen. I also encourage you to watch the 2 other videos that I've already released, one on how to prevent the theft of your dog on a country walk, and the second on how opportunist dog thieves are focusing their attention on stealing your dog from your garden. When I left the police service a few years ago now, the very first company that I set up was a private security company, and I specialised in the logistics industry. And my role was loss recovery and loss prevention. The loss recovery was investigating a bulk theft where lorries had been hijacked and the stock stolen, and then I would visit the warehouse operations and give advice on how the businesses could protect their warehouses, sometimes containing tens of millions of pounds worth of stock. Now, the methodology I used is used globally, and it's used to protect banks, jewellery stores, warehouses containing tens of millions of pounds of stock, and also we can use it to protect your gardens and prevent the theft of your dog. It's what's known as the layering principle. If you take this image here of an onion, it shows exactly what the layering principle is all about. So a single layer is quite flimsy and it's easily breached. However, when you apply numerous layers together, that's where you get the strength in the onion. And the onion layers protect the heart. And that's what we're going to do when we implement the security of protecting your dog whilst it's in your garden. Okay, the one thing you need to bear in mind when you're looking at the layering principle is a security measure isn't necessarily a layer of security, a physical boundary. It could simply be changing a bad habit or introducing a good habit. So the very first thing that you need to do, and here's my first tip, is to stand back from your property, look at the house face on, and answer this question. If I were a dog thief, how can I tell whether there's a dog in that particular house? So tip number 2. This is all to do with the visibility of your dog, and I'm not talking about whether your dog is transparent or not, but can your dog be seen from the street? Now, in my previous video on opportunist dog thieves, I explained that an opportunist dog thief will always have a cover story as to why they're in your front garden, like your garden path or in your driveway. But they don't go up every single driveway. There's usually a reason that they want to go closer to your property, and it's quite often because they've seen your dog. So tip number 2 is your dog should not be visible from the street. So if you're in the habit of allowing your dog to sit on a window ledge and look out at the passers-by, that habit needs to stop. The same if you have a front door that has a porchway and you're currently allowing your dog to run into the porchway and look out the glass. If the dog can look out, then the thief can look in. So again, that practice needs to stop, which is all about making sure that your dog cannot be seen from the street. Tip number 3, moving on from the visibility aspect of your dog, the tip number 3 concerns the construction of your front garden gate. Now, a lot of people like to use ornate cast iron gates with all the pretty swirls of metal. The problem being is if your dog's in the practice of going to that gate and looking out what's going on in the front garden or into the street, once again your dog is visible from the street and you do not want that to happen. So either you need to make the decision of replacing that gate with something of a solid construction or attaching something to your cast iron gate so your dog cannot be seen. So tip number 4. Sounds quite obvious, but you'll be surprised just how many people don't think about this. Most households these days will have 2 wheelie bins, one for general waste and one for recycling waste. And what I've seen some dog thieves do is they will take the first wheelie bin, put it right up against the gate, they put the second bin on its side, and they scale up the 2 bins like it's a pair of building blocks, jump over the gate and pass your dog to an accomplice. So if you own a dog, you need to keep your wheelie bins in your garden. Tip number 5, and this tip is all to do with gate security. And you would be really surprised to hear that a lot of the thefts from gardens, the thieves gain access to the garden because the gate has no security or very weak security. So what you need to do with garden gates is get into the habit of when you're returning from your dog walk and you go back into the garden, it's very easy to get distracted by other concerns. So the first thing you need to do is to deadlock that gate. Now a deadlock can simply be a recycled lock from somewhere else in the garden, from one of your garden sheds or from in the house, but it must be capable of being locked dead, which means if the thief tries to reach over the gate, they won't be able to unlock it. Now the obvious one is to attach a padlock, but if you shop around you'll find there's some very cheap options, and one of my favorites is the cast iron latch, where you can pull the gate shut and that latch will clip into position, and then in most cases you can attach a padlock to that latch, so you've got that double security on one lock. But always remember, with garden gate security, you should ideally have 2 forms of locks on the inside of the gate, and at least one of those locks must be midway down on the inside of the gate. Tip number 6. This concerns putting some form of warning device on your garden gate, something really simple, and you can use a small garden chime or get yourself a cheap bell that you might see used on cat collars. It just needs to be loud enough for you to hear it from inside your house, and it alerts you to the fact somebody might be scaling over your gate or shoving it or trying to come through the gate. That little warning that someone's at your gate makes all the difference, because you'll go and investigate. My next tip, which is tip number 7, is all about dog training. Now this requires a little bit of investment of your time, but if you want to leave your dog in the garden, then here is a very good tip for you, which is train your dog. If she or he hears somebody at either of the garden gates, instead of going to the gate to explore, but to run to mum or dad and let you know that there's somebody at the gate. And it's relatively simple to train a dog to do this. You can get the help of a family member or a friend, and all they need to do is they come to the gate, you know that they're at your gate, so you call your dog to you, reward your dog with a super treat, say good girl, good boy, and then repeat the process over 20 minutes, maybe half a dozen times, and then do that, say 3 or 4 days in a row, give your dog a break, and then do it again. Eventually your dog will get into the habit of realizing that whenever somebody comes to the gate, the very first thing that they do is to run to mum and dad and say, hey, I'll have that treat now, somebody's at the gate. So tip number 8. Now hang in there, we're almost finished, and if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to add any comments to the video, because we'd like to hear from you on anything that you want us to cover. So tip number 8 is to do with how you look at your security for your property. And what you have to do is bear in mind that you need to think of keeping the thief out as well as keeping your dog in. So you approach your security from outside in, which is first and foremost, it must keep the thief out, but at the same time, keep your dog in. So tip number 9, we're almost there. Tip number 9 is all to do with the perimeter of your garden fence and hedgerows. What I encourage you to do is to walk the perimeter of your garden with your dog, encouraging your dog to sniff around at the fence panels and fence line. It may well be that your dog's a bit of an escapologist and has been planning an escape in the near future. So what you want to make sure of is that your dog hasn't already been digging at a fence or has found a small gap in the fence is starting to push through. So use your dog to show you if there's any weaknesses in your hedgerow or fence line. So tip number 10. You're all aware of the expression of a stitch in time saves 9. Well, a repair in time saves your dog from being stolen, because a lot of dogs that get stolen from gardens actually get out and they're running around a neighbour's garden or around the neighbourhood, and they get found and they get stolen. So if you find a weakness in your fence line, if you find a gap in a hedgerow, then fix it immediately. Don't put it off to the next day or the next week, or you need to get the exact materials. A temporary repair is better than no repair. So if there's a problem in the fence line, then fix it. So there you have it. That's my top 10 tips on garden security. And remember the basic principle that the more layers that you have, the more secure your garden is. And I've listed all 10 of my tips in the description below. But remember, it isn't about just having those 10. You might want to think outside the box and think of other things. But basically the principle that you should be applying is, if it's easy to implement, if it's cheap to implement, you're more likely to do it. And you don't need to spend a fortune on your garden security. You don't need to turn your garden into a fortress. I'm Colin Butcher, the Pet Detective. You've been watching Pet Detective TV. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and share my video with all of your fellow dog owners. Thanks very much and look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.